Manager exposed for leaving black woman waiting 3 hours. Incredible transformation unfolds. Angela Johnson's heart raced as she checked her watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. 3 hours. 3 hours of waiting in a sterile conference room where the clock ticked louder than her pulse. She could feel frustration building up within her, a tension curling into a knot in her stomach. Today was supposed to be the day, a day to present the game-changing proposal that could catapult her career beyond the ceiling that had kept her trapped for so long. Instead, she was left alone, feeling invisible in a sea of privilege and indifference. Her mind spiraled through memories of her grandfather, the brilliant inventor whose groundbreaking ideas had once dazzled audiences. But like an untold story etched into family whispers, his genius had been overshadowed by a world quick to dismiss him. She could almost hear him say, "You can't let them silence you." But the echoes of his words felt heavy now, like chains binding her to the past. Overwhelmed, Angela glanced around the room, noting the hustle of her co-workers, many oblivious to her growing despair. Would they see her as a capable leader? Or would she be reduced to a role that played second fiddle in a patriarchal corporate symphony? Angela's fingers trembled as she opened her laptop, scrolling through her presentation's final details, her vision blurring as the doubt lurked in the background. Would they recognize her worth? Or would she be left waiting again, like so many times before? Anxiety ignited a burning desire to confront her boss, yet a part of her hesitated. This was a delicate balancing act. With her credibility on the line, Angela wrestled with the dilemma. Should she stand up for herself and risk a confrontation, or wait patiently yet again for recognition? Each unanswered message gnawed at her dignity. Just as the weight of uncertainty began to feel insurmountable, Sarah, her mentor and guiding light, amidst the harsh realities of their corporate culture, entered the room. The older woman's presence sparked something in Angela. "You okay?" Sarah asked, her eyes revealing that she understood more than just the surface-level chaos. Angela shared her frustrations, and as they brainstormed together late into the night, the air thick with determination, the spark ignited into a bonfire of hope. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her pulse quickened as the investors filed into the room. This was it. The moment of truth loomed, and anticipation warped time. The stakes were higher than just her proposal. This was an opportunity to challenge biases that had long gone unchecked. Yet doubt crept in, a whisper stirring within her. What if they just saw the woman rather than her vision? Angela felt her breath tighten. She swayed between fear and fierce resolve. She knew she could dazzle the investors with her proposal, but could she pierce through the walls of indifference that surrounded her? As Sarah's reassuring nod reinforced her bravery, Angela stood before the group, ready to present. But just as the words formed on her lips, a shiver of realization froze her in place. What if this was not just about her? What if today she had the power to dismantle an entire system of dismissal? The air thickened, her heart racing as the fate of the moment hung in the balance. Would the acknowledgement she desperately craved finally arrive, or would it slip through her fingers like sand? She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening as silence enveloped the room. A moment suspended in time, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Angela steadied her breath, the silence stretching almost uncomfortably, giving way to uncertainty that gnawed at her like a persistent itch. The room was a tableau of expressions: skepticism, curiosity, indifference. Each investor's gaze felt like a spotlight illuminating the very fears she wanted to cast aside. It was now or never. The opening line of her presentation danced on the tip of her tongue, but the weight of anticipation settled like an anchor in her chest. She blinked, anchoring herself to Sarah's encouraging smile as if it were a lifeline in a turbulent sea. Confidence surged within her. Perhaps today wasn't just about presenting a proposal, but about showing reluctant investors what a leader truly looked like. A woman who would fight her way out of the shadows. Determined, she began, her voice cut through the tension, resonating with conviction. Thank you for waiting. Today, I'll present how our innovative approach can revolutionize our market strategy and ensure inclusivity while driving unprecedented growth. Each word was a deliberate step on a tightrope, balancing between empowerment and vulnerability. She weaved personal anecdotes with robust market data, crafting a narrative that encapsulated not only her professional expertise, but also her identity, a black woman in a corporate landscape that often felt alien. As she progressed, she could see the initial skepticism fade into intrigue. Their eyes widened, nodding slowly in acknowledgement of her insights. Angela felt a surge of adrenaline, sensing her early anxiety dissolve beneath layers of assurance. This was her moment to provide evidence that led not just to numbers, but to stories that mattered, to showcase the unseen power of diverse perspectives, fostering creativity and innovation. She glanced briefly at Sarah, whose expression reflected pride and belief. In that fleeting moment, Angela understood her journey wasn't just about career advancement. It was about dismantling the walls of injustice and indifference, piece by piece. Was she finally peeling back the layers of prejudice entrenched in her workplace? Could her vision resonate in a way that propelled the company forward, ultimately pushing her through? As she approached the conclusion, a subtle excitement tinged her nerves, urging her to use her platform for more than profit. I believe that we innovate best when we listen to all voices at the table, she declared, her heart racing. Our company has the potential to lead, not just in profits, but in inclusivity. The success of our proposal hinges on our courage to break free from convention, to embrace all perspectives. Angela's words echoed through the room, and she felt a ripple of energy bounce back at her. Suddenly, doubt transformed into unity. Faces shifted from stoic evaluation to engaged consideration. She could see them beginning to understand. But as the applause erupted at the end of her pitch, Angela's insides churned with a conflicting mixture of triumph and worry. Had she just opened a door to new opportunities, or would her vulnerability be met with the same indifference she had faced before? Would they buy into a narrative that might actually change the culture of their company? Just as she felt the pulse of resurgence, her boss, Mr. Anderson, stood to respond. Angela clenched her fists, uncertain of the reception. His expression was inscrutable. Was it acknowledgement, or something less? Before he could speak, Angela's heart thudded, a silent prayer echoing in her mind. The moment of truth lingered just beyond their collective breaths. This was more than a mere proposal. It was a potential shift within the very ethos of the company. But would her words leave a lasting mark, or would they blend into the corporate noise, forgotten before the day was done? The air thickened again as he cleared his throat. The decision about her future, and potentially the future of many others, teetered on the brink of revelation. Mr. Anderson's voice sliced through the tension like a knife. Thank you, Angela, for your impassioned presentation. I believe we all appreciate your insights today. However, he paused, scanning the room, implementing such a radical shift will take more than just words. The response landed heavily in her chest, setting off a rapid sequence of emotions. Was he dismissing her, or preparing to face the challenging conversation she had just opened up? It was infuriating to see that familiar wall being rebuilt, even as she had taken strides forward. Angela fought against the urge to squirm under the scrutiny of her colleagues. "It's easy to agree, but the real challenge lies in taking action," he continued, his gaze falling on various investors in the room. Angela resisted the urge to interject, to defend her proposal, to rally her points with the fire they deserved. Instead, she found herself questioning everything. Had she overstepped? Did she expose herself to their doubts without the promised support? But then something deep inside her sparked. This was a critical moment, an intersection of resistance and potential. She would not sink back into silence. "I understand that change can be uncomfortable," she said, her voice now steady and firm. "But true innovation requires us to embrace discomfort. Our competitors are not waiting. They're transforming as we speak. Why can't we do the same?" Mr. Anderson's brow furrowed slightly. Would he challenge her again? Or was this his way of inviting deeper dialogue? Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably, and a few exchanged hesitant glances. With each passing moment, Angela felt the urge to expand the conversation. This was no longer just about her proposal. It was about the kind of culture they wanted to build, a culture willing to step outside established norms for something greater. "All I'm asking is for us to consider the long-term vision," she continued, emboldened, "to harness the potential of an inclusive workplace, and not just for the sake of appearances. Innovation thrives on diverse ideas and experiences. If we neglect this, we will stagnate." She could sense the energy beginning to change, the slight stirring of curiosity among her peers, perhaps even admiration. No longer just individuals evaluating a proposal, but a collective encounter with a challenging concept. This was the moment she had craved, and yet it felt charged with a weight she had not anticipated. Mr. Anderson nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of contemplation and challenge. "And what would you propose as the next step?" Angela felt a rush of adrenaline. This was an opening. A series of workshops fostering dialogue on inclusivity and empowering selected teams to pilot new projects. We could bring in external experts to mentor our teams and inspire genre-defining innovations. Her heart raced as she envisioned the different paths this could yield, transforming not just the company but her in the process. The fears hovering just beneath the surface could no longer cage her. "And how will you ensure these sessions lead to actionable change?" he pressed, and for the first time she recognized the spark of genuine intrigue in his inquiry. "I propose a feedback mechanism, monitoring the outcomes and iterating the program based on employee experiences and results," she replied, her thoughts rapidly collating into a strategy. The wheels in Mr. Anderson's mind visibly turned as he weighed her proposition. Still, her heart thudded in anticipation. Would he take the leap with her? The room was charged with a tension she could almost touch, their futures tangling at the intersection of possibility. Then, just as her thoughts began to expand into a vision of what could be, his words came crashing back like an unexpected wave. "I want to evaluate this proposition with our executive team before we move forward. It needs their backing for me to support it." Angela's heart sank at the bureaucratic hurdle, but determination grew in her chest. She would not let this moment pass by. "Then let's present together. I'll gather the data needed to convince them," she said, her voice now imbued with resolve. Mr. Anderson's eyes widened, a hint of surprise flickering across his face. "Very well. Pitch to them with me. What's necessary must be reinforced." An unexpected alliance formed in the heat of their conversation. Meanwhile, doubts dwindled, replaced by the promise of a collaborative effort that could dismantle the very fabric of resistance she had long faced. As they parted ways, a new sense of purpose coursed through her, igniting visions of broader change. But would her ambitions match the reality of their corporate culture? The air hummed with potential, yet apprehension lingered. The real challenge awaited. Was she ready to confront not only the company's leadership, but also her deepest insecurities regarding her ability to lead? The moment of follow-through was closer than ever, but would the reality of her fight manifest as intended, or would the shadows claw back into view as she raised her voice once more? Angela spent the following days immersed in a flurry of preparation. Each meeting felt like a battle, a chess match where every piece of information was a potential weapon in her advocacy. She meticulously compiled data, case studies, and quotes from influential thought leaders. Yet underneath the surface of her professional rigor, Angela grappled with the swirling uncertainty of her own worthiness. Was she capable of igniting the type of transformational change she envisioned? The reminder of her recent encounter with Mr. Anderson hung over her like a storm cloud. His initial dismissal felt like a personal affront, not merely a professional challenge. She replayed the moment repeatedly, dissecting every inflection, every nuance in his tone. She had laid herself bare in that room, exposing her belief in progress, only to feel the chill of corporate skepticism inching back to life. As she gathered her thoughts, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. She reminded herself of the potential she felt during her presentation, of the moment when the energy shifted in the room. Despite her self-doubt, she recalled the nearly palpable curiosity on some of her colleagues' faces, that spark of interest she had almost extinguished in her own hesitation. Angela needed to harness that flicker into a flame. Angela carved out time to reach out to colleagues who had expressed interest in her proposals. Each conversation revealed hidden alliances, individuals willing to advocate for change in muted tones, yet lacking the platform or courage to speak up themselves. One by one, their voices began to intertwine with hers, forging a network of support. They agreed to join her for practice sessions, providing feedback and insights. Their belief in her grew in tandem with her developing confidence. The day of the executive presentation arrived, and Angela entered the glass-walled boardroom, feeling both invigorated and paranoid. The sight of the expansive table filled with those who had the power to dismiss her again was unnerving. Mr. Anderson settled at the head of the table, a faint trace of encouragement in his gaze. She took a deep breath, steeling herself as she faced the decision-makers, ready to unveil her vision with newfound strength. Standing before them, poised yet vulnerable, she set the stage. "We stand at a crossroads," she began, her voice firm but steady. The energy had shifted, the air was charged with anticipation. "We can choose to follow the same path, or we can redefine what success means for us and confront our biases head-on. Innovation lives at the intersection of diversity and inclusion." As Angela progressed through her slides, the narrative unfolded like a story that wrapped her audience in its grasp. She introduced success stories from other organizations that had implemented inclusive practices, framed within data that highlighted the tangible benefits: productivity increases, improved morale, and enhanced creativity. She could see the skepticism falter in Mr. Anderson's expression as she wove a persuasive tapestry of hope and practicality. Yet just as she reached the climax of her presentation, another voice interjected. One of the senior executives, a man she had always regarded as a formidable opponent, challenged her fiercely. "Angela, how do you respond to concerns about our existing structure? Some believe we risk our efficiency and bottom line with these changes." In that moment, she felt the weight of the room's eyes upon her, the judgment clinging like a shroud. It was time for raw authenticity. Angela paused, deliberately crafting her response as something more than mere numbers. "Change is inherently uncomfortable, but efficiency is meaningless if it comes at the cost of creativity and employee engagement. I invite us to consider why we are here. Each of us holds the ability to elevate this company, but we must be willing to share our differences and support one another." A hush enveloped the room, and Angela could sense the tide turning as she leaned into the discomfort her response created, inviting their fear of change into the light. Would her vulnerability break the barriers they had built? Was this the moment where she could unlock her true potential? Her heart raced as she shifted her gaze from the antagonistic executive to the rest of the room. The air hung thick with unspoken questions, and she was ready for them all. As she felt their collective focus sharpen, a new resolve blossomed within her. But as the discussion commenced, shadows of doubt crept back to the forefront of her mind. Would her commitment to authenticity resonate long enough to create lasting change? The meeting shifted into a heated dialogue, and Angela was faced with unexpected opposition at every turn. But this was only the beginning. Would she navigate her fears, transcending her own limitations, or would she find herself slipping back into the confines of self-doubt? The outcome remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Her fight was far from over. The moment of truth was approaching, and as Angela prepared to defend her position, she sensed that clarity and resolve were being forged in the crucible of this confrontation. Yet in the back of her mind, a question bubbled up relentlessly. Would she emerge from this fray transformed, ready to step into her own power, or would the very resistance she aimed to dismantle bind her once again? As the barrage of challenges continued, Angela felt a surge of adrenaline within her. Each question posed by the opposition amplified the urgency of her mission and the complexity of her internal conflict. This was more than a business initiative. It was a fight for her credibility, an assertion of her place in an arena that had often felt hostile. A senior director across the table turned his scrutiny on her. "You speak of inclusivity, Angela, but at what cost? Is the company prepared to bear the burden of transitioning our culture if it risks profitability?" His incredulity struck like a physical blow, and her instincts flared defensively. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the moment. "Change incurs risk, absolutely," she countered, her voice sharpening, "but the real danger lies in stagnation. History has shown us that the most innovative and profitable companies embrace diversity. It's not just an ethical choice, it's a strategic necessity." Applying this perspective twisted an anxiety within her. Life inside the boardroom was a game, one she was only beginning to master. Every rebuttal generated a ripple effect, terror mixing with excitement. Here she was, willingly diving into the heart of dissent, standing firm on a foundation of belief, a foundation she was not entirely certain wouldn't crumble under pressure. As the debate grew, Angela's pulse quickened, the edges of her vision narrowing into a tunnel. She found herself grappling with specific fears. Would her colleagues interpret her earnestness as naive? Would she be seen as a disruptor or a visionary? Battling this internal dichotomy took her focus away from Mr. Anderson's contemplative gaze, fearing any slip in her articulation could plunge her purpose into oblivion. "Angela, forgive me," chimed another voice, a fellow advocate who had joined the session reluctantly. "But many of us are entrenched in our functions. My team values structure. Are we truly prepared for the creative chaos you're suggesting?" This was the crux of it. Her motivation darted between the passion for creating change and the trepidation of dismantling established norms. "I am asking us to consider structured flexibility," she replied, carefully calibrating her tone. "We can redefine our operational framework without abandoning our values. This is an opportunity to align our objectives while solving real employee grievances." Feeling a sliver of authority bloom, Angela pressed her case. She began recounting a personal story that tied into the corporate narrative. "When I first arrived here, I was often made to feel invisible," she said. "Yet, within that struggle, I found resilience, not just within myself, but among colleagues who shared similar experiences. Our unique perspectives could have served this company had they been sought out." Her impromptu vulnerability pulled threads at the fabric of the room. The senior executives, once challenging her motives, seemed engaged, eyes flickering as they processed her message. But just as she felt an opening, one of the toughest figures on the board interjected. "The reality is that a shift in culture may not happen overnight, Angela. Some will resist this change to their core. Resistance is not an obstacle," Angela responded, a newfound edge to her voice. "It's a journey towards understanding. I'm not asking for immediate transformation. I'm inviting dialogue." Each exchange sparked the growing flame of resolve within her. She was no longer simply presenting data, she was staking a claim. Every argument rebutted deep-seated fears, revealing her power, her potential. Still, lurking in the shadows of her mind was that question. Had she dug deep enough to confront the entirety of her truth, or were there facets of her story yet to be revealed? The meeting stretched onward, echoes of disbelief clashing with tentative optimism in the boardroom ambiance. She could feel a shift in energy, a collective inhalation, a willingness to engage in deeper discussion. But as she continued to attract attention, Angela was acutely aware of her own turmoil. Would her authenticity invite accountability, or would it fracture the very walls she sought to dismantle? As the discourse reached a cacophony of perspectives, Angela stood at the precipice of revelation. A decision loomed before her, one that would both illuminate and challenge her understanding of leadership. Could she truly lead with authenticity in an environment bound by process and skepticism? Somewhere amidst the turmoil, a new fear began to surface. What if she was not just fighting for inclusion, but also for acceptance of her own identity? The question echoed with weight. Would she fully embrace who she was becoming, or falter under the pressure of expectation? And in that moment, as the tension crackled and sparked, Angela knew that the deeper journey of her evolution was just beginning. How far could she stretch before the threads of her determination snapped? As the meeting finally began to wane, a mix of relief and incredulity washed over Angela. She had not expected the opposition to soften, their debate transforming into a dialogue. Each voice around the table was a brushstroke on the canvas of her vision, transitioning from skepticism to curiosity. Yet beneath the surface of achievement, a nagging doubt flickered persistently. Had she truly accomplished anything significant? Or was this just a fleeting moment of acceptance? When the gathering adjourned, Angela excused herself to the restroom. She gazed at her reflection in the mirror, scrutinizing the lines of uncertainty creeping around her eyes. What was she really fighting for? She was aware of the irony. The very institution that had initially marginalized her stood on the precipice of acknowledging her worth. Yet could she rely on this recognition to anchor her self-esteem? That night, Angela sat down with her journal, an outlet for her whirlwind thoughts. As she sipped herbal tea, the rhythmic flow of her pen began to unlock vulnerabilities she had shied away from. Her past experiences of invisibility in the workplace, the crushing weight of expectation. It dawned on her that the essence of leadership lay not merely in the persuasion of others, but in the strength to embrace one's own narrative. She found herself revisiting her life before arriving at this firm. The years spent grappling with self-doubt had bereaved her of confidence. Growing up, she often felt like an outsider, her experiences at home starkly contrasting with those of her affluent peers. Reflecting on these memories, Angela resolved not to mask her identity in the professional sphere. She would summon the courage to transform her pain into purpose. In that moment of clarity, she made a pivotal decision. Tomorrow, she would initiate a workshop tailored for her colleagues, one designed to give voice to the unspoken experiences they all carried. It would serve as a platform for sharing personal stories, an exercise in empathy. Angela wanted to harness the power of vulnerability, recognizing that only by understanding one another could they begin to cultivate true inclusivity. The following morning arrived, and Angela walked into the office with renewed vigor. As she passed her colleagues, she unveiled her plan to several trusted allies, gauging their reactions. The diversity of opinions was apparent. Some were contemplative, while others voiced concerns about the potential backlash. Their hesitations stirred a blend of ambition and anxiety within her. Could she handle the risk of attempting something so unconventional? Yet the more she explained, the more her breath quickened with determination. She envisioned participants leaving the workshop feeling inspired, a reckoning of sorts transforming their conversions from complicit to courageous. And somewhere, buried deep in her psyche, Angela recognized that this was her moment to lead from a place of authenticity. As she prepared her presentation, the apprehensions crawled back. Would her colleagues take her seriously? Could her ambition withstand the inevitable pushback? The morning sun shone brightly through her office window, illuminating her resolve. She reminded herself that any leaders before her faced skepticism, and their ultimate triumph was born from the crucible of challenge. Just as the workshop began, she encountered an unexpected interruption. An imposing figure from upper management, a staunch critic of innovation, entered the room. A ripple of discomfort swept through the attendees, tension gripping the air like a vice. Angela's heart raced. Would he dismiss her efforts? Or could this be a transformative moment for both her and her colleagues? As he prepared to speak, uncertainty gripped her veins. This was it, an opportunity, or perhaps her greatest trial yet. Would this confrontation unveil her true potential, or would it push her deeper into the shadows of hesitation? And within the cacophony of doubt and hope, Angela realized that her journey was far from over. Something monumental was about to unfold. Angela stood at the helm of her workshop, a carefully curated assembly of colleagues, her heart thrumming against her chest. The atmosphere buzzed with a mix of anticipation and anxiety as the upper management figure, Glenn Matthews, settled into a chair at the back. His presence felt like a double-edged sword. He was both a witness to her endeavor and a potential executioner of her aspirations. As she opened the floor, a wave of vulnerability poured in, an unexpected tide that swept her colleagues into raw sharing. People recounted experiences of exclusion that mirrored Angela's own. The unspoken weight of their realities hung in the air, a poignant reminder of silence's suffocating grip. In that moment, Angela discovered the magnetic strength of shared stories, a language deeper than any corporate jargon. Their collective narratives resonated, turning nervous laughter into earnest dialogue. Amidst the unfolding revelations, Angela caught a glimpse of Glenn as he shifted in his seat, crossing and uncrossing his arms. She felt the tension radiating from him, a stark contrast to the openness blossoming around her. How would he respond? Something within her stirred, a quiet conviction that this workshop was not just an opportunity for them to share. It was an arena for her to assert her identity unapologetically. As she facilitated discussions, Angela's confidence began to burgeon. Each shared story bolstered her belief that vulnerability was not a weakness, but rather a conduit for strength, capable of priming the atmosphere for change. This workshop was no longer a mere initiative. It had morphed into a pivotal confrontation against the institution's long-held norms, and she was ready to challenge them. "Let's talk about how we can be better allies," she urged, her voice steady. The room full of faces nodded, reflecting a newfound resolve as she guided them to conceive actionable strategies. But deep inside, a thorn of self-doubt began to creep back. Was she merely naive to think they could navigate institutional resistance? Glenn's presence acted as a stark reminder of the uphill battle that lay ahead. Just as momentum seemed to solidify, Glenn raised his hand. The hallowed silence settled over the group like a heavy blanket. "Is this really the right approach?" he questioned, his tone imbued with skepticism. "Being vulnerable can lead to oversharing and unproductive conversations. We need to maintain professionalism, after all." The air shifted, sharp with tension. Angela felt the warmth of hope slip, a chill seeping through the cracks. Glenn's words threatened to unravel the fragile bonds that had formed, testing her resolve. Yet, she realized this moment could define her journey. The paradigm was shifting. She had the opportunity to stand firm and augment her narrative with purpose. "Vulnerability is a bridge to understanding, Glenn," she retorted, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "Ignoring our emotional realities only foments division. This workshop is about constructing that bridge." An electric current pulsed through the room, the attendees leaning in, sensing the confrontation. Glenn hesitated, surprise flickering on his face, but the atmosphere around him was changing. The room erupted into discussion, a whirlwind of voices overlapping as her colleagues rallied behind her, their collective support igniting a core of rebellion and clarity. Angela's heart swelled at the camaraderie forming against the skepticism. Perhaps this was not just a confrontation, it was a clarification of her mission. In that moment of reckoning, she understood that her journey transcended this workshop. It was about her capacity to lead and grow through discomfort, to catalyze change even in resistance. Smiling at her colleagues, she felt a surge of empowerment mingle with her determination. However, the devilish whispers of doubt remained, gnawing at her focus. Had she truly done enough? Would they really feel emboldened to advocate for change beyond this room? As the session approached its conclusion, Angela sensed an impending question looming within her mind, a realization that this transformation had only just begun. Whatever she had faced with Glenn was merely a prelude to the larger challenges ahead, an awakening of the struggle to carve out true inclusivity and healing within the organization. And as she glanced at Glenn again, there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. That flicker brought a swell deeper than mere validation. It hinted at the potential of breaking the mold, but it also churned a latent fear beneath the surface. What would the real price of this confrontation demand from her in the days to follow? The moment of truth lay ahead, and she had to be ready to navigate it all. Angela woke the next morning, the remnants of the previous day's workshop still echoing in her mind. A tumultuous cocktail of adrenaline, pride and anxiety brewed within her as she considered the path ahead. Despite the tentative respect she perceived in Glenn's eyes, his skepticism rang louder in her mind, a reminder that the organizational culture had deep-rooted norms resistant to change. She brewed a cup of coffee, the steam curling up like her conflicting thoughts. What did it mean to lead in a space that craved evolution, yet clung tenaciously to old-guard attitudes? The sunlight streaming through her kitchen window illuminated a clutter of professional development books sprawled across her countertop. She had marked some chapters, highlighting passages that struck chords between personal empowerment and collective action. But were they enough to dismantle the walls of corporate inertia? The clock was ticking. She had only days before the next all-hands meeting. The opportunity for broader advocacy loomed, but so did the fear of stumbling in front of her colleagues and upper management. Courage swelled in her with each passing tick. She had ignited a spark, and now she had to fan it into a flame. Sitting down at her desk, Angela began drafting an outline for a follow-up session. She needed to channel the energy from the workshop into actionable points that would appeal to the broader company objectives. What if she could tie their shared vulnerability into practical frameworks for accountability? Crafting an agenda that detailed personal growth alongside corporate goals could bridge the chasms of misunderstanding. As ideas flowed, her phone buzzed. An unexpected email from a colleague whose job she admired struck her like a whip crack. The subject line read, "Feedback on workshop, Glenn's take." Angela felt her stomach clench involuntarily. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen before committing to opening the message. What were your thoughts on Angela's approach? The email referenced Glenn's perspective on her workshop and his proposed changes for the next one. He emphasized the importance of maintaining professionalism, though no concrete feedback lingered. Instead, a subtle undercurrent insinuated that he viewed her navigation of vulnerability as an untested ideal, more than a strategy worth embracing. Angela's pulse quickened as she processed his words. Was her pursuit of authenticity perceived as a liability? Or did he merely lack the vision to see that their growth depended on such authenticity? The discomfort of the moment struck a chord deeper than her previous fears. Determined not to acquiesce to pessimism, Angela began typing a response. She didn't want to negate Glenn's concerns, but she needed to express how vulnerability could function as a core component for long-term professional development. As she articulated her thoughts, her confidence surged. This was more than just a response. It was her stand for authenticity and clarity. In signing off, she attached a proposed agenda for their next meeting, already threading in her ideas about collective accountability and growth strategies centered around inclusivity. Now came the real test: how to face Glenn in the next meeting. Would he be receptive to her initiative, or would he double down on his conventionality, clinging to safety over growth? These questions echoed loudly in her mind as she readied herself for a day packed with uncertainty. It was a delicate game of chess, every move calculated yet vulnerable to unforeseen counterattacks. What if Glenn dismissed her ideas outright? Or worse, what if he chose to sabotage them before they could gain traction? As she prepared to leave her office, her thoughts racing, she felt an unmistakable spark of resolve, something close to defiance. This was her moment, not merely to stand against Glenn's skepticism, but to carve a path for herself and others who yearned for growth in an environment that stifled it. With a steely determination in her heart, Angela stepped toward the door, ready for what was to come. The next meeting would not just be about presenting ideas. It would be about confronting opposition, challenging perceptions, and affirming her place in this transformative journey. But first, she had to ensure her voice could not be silenced. As the door swung open, she couldn't shake the sensation that change, though daunting, glimmered at the horizon, aching to be seized. The real battle lay ahead, and it was time for Angela to draw her line in the sand. Angela stepped into the conference room, the air thick with anticipation. As she settled into her seat, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. Her heart thrummed with intensity. This was not just a meeting, it was a pivotal point in her professional journey. She stole glances around the table, gauging the expressions of her colleagues, their eyes flicking from her to the agenda. Glenn was seated at the head, his demeanor calm, but the underlying tension was palpable. A flicker of doubt threatened to creep in. What if her ideas fell flat? The agenda she'd crafted felt like a tightly wound coil, ready to spring or snap. Shaking off the despairing thoughts, she mentally recited her points, steeling herself for her first presentation since the workshop. She'd rehearsed this moment, practiced speaking confidently about vulnerability as a strength rather than a liability. "Good morning, everyone," Glenn began, his voice ringing out with authority. "I appreciate you all taking the time to meet today. We've seen significant feedback from Angela's workshop, and I believe we can build from that. Today, she'll take us through her proposed frameworks for our next steps." Her pulse quickened. There it was, a foot in the door. It was a chance to not only share but also challenge. Angela adapted her breathing, focusing on the sound of her voice as she began. "Thank you, Glenn. I wanted to start by acknowledging our strengths and challenges as a team." As she spoke, she sought the eye contact of her colleagues. One by one, they responded with nods of acknowledgement. Each affirmation fueled her momentum. She delved into her agenda, discussing the necessity of personal growth in the workplace and how embracing vulnerability could ignite deeper connections and foster accountability. Yet throughout her presentation, she sensed Glenn's skepticism lurking just beneath the surface. He interjected, "While I understand the sentiments being expressed, we must remember this is a business environment. Our priority must remain professionalism and results." The words felt like cold water splashed on her enthusiasm. Angela felt the heat rise to her face, anger and frustration flickering within. This was the very attitude that had stifled so many voices before hers. Gritting her teeth, she carefully curated her response. "Glenn, I wholeheartedly agree that professionalism is critical. However, what I am proposing isn't a departure from professionalism, but an enhancement of it. When we risk engaging authentically, it opens avenues for more creative and productive outputs, which naturally lead to better results." There, she had done it. The words hung in the air like a daring challenge. Surged by a newfound courage, she pressed on, spotlighting real case studies that showcased companies thriving through such cultural shifts. Yet, she braced herself. Would her colleagues join her or side with Glenn's traditionalist approach? As the discussions unfolded, she noticed a few nodding slowly, while others engaged in whispered conversations, processing her argument. The back-and-forth volley felt invigorating and draining, a culmination of tension played out in public view. In that moment, she realized that she was no longer merely the underdog fighting against Glenn. She had become an advocate representing those who longed for a new approach. Just as she felt her voice gaining strength, Glenn made a decisive comment. "Change is all well and good, Angela, but how do we ensure this doesn't lead to chaos or loss of direction?" The room fell quiet as every gaze shifted back to her, awaiting her answer. This moment felt pivotal, not just for her argument, but for the trajectory of the company culture. She took a breath, feeling a jolt of clarity. By implementing structured feedback mechanisms, consistent reinforcement in leadership training, and ensuring that accountability remains integral to our framework, we can drive change responsibly, she replied, her voice steady and unyielding. But just as she thought she had held her ground, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was yet to come. As the meeting wore on, it became evident that Glenn wasn't prepared to concede just yet. She felt his unrelenting gaze as he sized her up, strategizing his next move. An internal fire ignited within her. She began to sense the contours of this confrontation. She had to maintain her composure while preparing for a potential fallout. Would she rally her colleagues to truly support her, or would Glenn's formidable presence extinguish her progress? As the meeting drew to a close, Angela knew the conflict was far from resolved. The horizon of change still beckoned tantalizingly, but now the battle lines were drawn more clearly than ever. The room crackled with unspoken tension. She was at the brink of an important realization. The time had come to fully embrace the adversities, but as she eyed Glenn, a thought echoed in her mind. What would it take for her to flip the script? The concept buzzed tantalizingly, waiting for her to seize it. With her thoughts racing as she left the room, she knew this was just the beginning of a deeper struggle to prove that authenticity was not a liability, but the very thing that could drive transformation. What further challenges would she have to confront to solidify her place in this evolving landscape? Angela had spent years in the shadows, observing and waiting for the moment when she could stand ready to confront the biases that had formed barriers to her success. Now, as she exited the conference room, that long-awaited moment had crystallized. Clinging to the resolve that had ignited within her during the workshop, Angela recognized her struggle mirrored that of countless individuals who felt dismissed, overlooked, or relegated to the background. Over the next few days, she channeled her energy into transforming her ideas into actionable strategies. Each encounter with her colleagues became an opportunity to build alliances. Women and men alike shared their stories of frustration and aspiration. She fostered an environment that honored differences and initiated dialogues that echoed genuine sentiments. Vibrant discussions turned her once solitary journey into a shared fight for recognition. With those connections growing stronger, Angela proposed a company-wide initiative, Voices of Change, crafted to elevate diverse perspectives while establishing accountability in every department. She reached out to Glenn, who had become both her greatest critic and unintentional ally, inviting his insights on refining the framework. When he expressed tentative support, she seized the opportunity, leveraging that shared vision to garner further backing from other executives. "Angela, this represents a significant shift for our organization," Glenn remarked during one of their meetings. "I'm still cautious, but if you can pilot this program successfully, it could redefine how we see our culture." The acknowledgement ignited a wave of confidence within her that had once felt unattainable. For the first time, Angela didn't just feel like a lone voice lost within a challenging corporate landscape. She was becoming an architect of change. When the launch day for Voices of Change arrived, Angela stood in front of a diverse audience of colleagues, her heart racing with anticipation. She completed her presentation detailing the program's structure, goals, and most importantly, its alignment with their company's business objectives. "Together, we'll construct a dialogue that eliminates silos and creates a culture of transparency," she declared, her voice steady and commanding. Inclusivity is not only good for morale, it has been proven to drive innovation and performance. We will build a bridge toward a result-driven future that embraces our differences rather than shuns them. As she spoke, she maintained direct eye contact. For the first time in her career, she saw nods of affirmation, faces reflecting hope, and a sense of urgency resonating through her colleagues, shifting the dynamics of the room. Angela illustrated how her proposals were informed by empirical data, indicating how inclusive practices had led to quantifiable efficiency increases in other companies. But moments later, Glenn raised his hand, mirroring the apprehension that had plagued her. "How can we be certain this won't disrupt our existing workflows? We risk accountability when making such changes." At this pivotal juncture, Angela felt the daunting weight of the moment, a tempest brewing within her. Yet she also understood that this was her transformational threshold. "Innovation requires us to disrupt established norms, Glenn. We'll ensure no voice is silenced, and we'll measure the impacts collectively, iterating as necessary. This program doesn't demand blind faith. Rather, it asks for commitment to mutual growth." Angela's conviction shattered the existing doubts. Applause erupted as her colleagues began to rally behind her vision. The tides had officially turned. The collective energy felt electric. It was a tangible shift she had dared to cultivate. As the initiative took off, feedback from earlier sessions repeatedly validated her direction. Colleagues began applying the principles they learned to team projects, and reports emerged, showcasing increased collaboration and shared accountability. The corporate culture of skepticism gradually receded, replaced by newfound enthusiasm for embracing differences. Angela's confidence solidified with every success note that arrived in her inbox. Soon, she was not just a participant in her career, but a recognized change-maker. One day, as she walked through the office, she was overtaken by a realization. She had transformed from simply waiting for recognition to becoming an agent for change, leaving behind the weight of doubt that had burdened her for so long. Her identity as a leader blossomed, and with her promotion to a managerial position, Angela established mentorship programs aimed at fostering new talents, uniting those who had felt unheard, and illuminating paths for others to follow. She had conquered the very biases that had held her captive, boldly proving that equitability could complement operational efficiency. In the end, Angela didn't just achieve targeted results. She demonstrated that vulnerability could be a profound strength, carving a path forward for those ready to rise with her. Realizing her dreams and more, Angela emerged robust and fully actualized, proud of her identity and voice, the unseen undercurrents of her journey now transformed into the vibrant flow of possibility. This was the beginning of a culture inexorably moving toward possibilities, rooted in the very principles of inclusivity she had fought to establish. Today, she wasn't just recognized. She was indeed a beacon of hope for others journeying through the same shadows she once dwelled in. Now you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about this inspiring conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.